Welcome to What's the Truth podcast. I am honored today to be joined by two friends of mine, Todd and Heather Laba. I've had the honor of knowing both of you for a handful of years and have been so blessed by your ministry, your testimony, your example, and so many other things. And I'm particularly grateful that you're with us today to talk about a very difficult season of your life. And if I'm not mistaken, this coming spring, you will be the 10th anniversary of the passing of your daughter. Is that correct? It's coming up on 10 years now.
Correct.
10 years.
In March.
What a horrible story, at least from our human perspective. And yet, I know God doesn't waste anything, and he uses all things for his glory. We can't wrap our minds around that, especially in a situation like this. But I want to talk today, and likely over the next couple of episodes with you, about your story and how the Lord might use it to both encourage as well as normalize the grieving process for people that are walking through that. Is that fair? Is that okay with you guys?
That's good.
That's great. Yeah.
Todd, let's start with you and maybe just really quickly introduce yourself for our listeners, and then we'll have Heather do the same thing. But really what I'd love for you to introduce is your family and this tragedy that happened almost 10 years ago, so that we can kind of set the stage for the listener.
Yeah. So it's a joy to be here with you all. The joyous husband of 37 years of Heather, my high school sweetheart, and the privilege of raising three beautiful daughters. Elise was our eldest. We had her here on earth for just over 26 years. So, yeah, it's great to be here.
Thank you. And Heather?
I am Heather, grateful to be married to Todd also for this long, for more than 35 years, 37 years, and the privilege of raising three daughters. And we did some of that overseas. We lived in South Africa for 14 years, and so a good majority of those years we raised a family overseas. But yes.
So I recognize the fact that as I ask questions, no doubt opening wounds, and yet, please know on behalf of so many people that will be listening to this, how much we appreciate your vulnerability and transparency as you share parts of your story. But if you don't mind, tell us what happened almost 10 years ago. Todd, do you mind to start out?
I'll be happy to. So it's an important fact. It plays into the story a bit, where Elise was on a weekend away, a girls' weekend away with her mother-in-law, her sister-in-law. They were up in North Carolina, and they were returning home on a Sunday afternoon. And at just around noon, they were parked on the side of the road. Elise's mother-in-law had a bad coffee and was just ill at the time, and so she was outside of the vehicle, and they were rear-ended by a drunk driver up in northern Georgia.
And at that time, we lived overseas, and so we got that call the evening, our time, and we knew that an accident had taken place. Elise was newly married. She'd been married for just over 6 months at the time, and our son-in-law had contacted Todd to say that there had been a situation, an incident. He didn't know anything about it, and so he was on his way to the hospital. Of course, we started praying, and Todd was taking those calls primarily, just keeping tabs on what was happening. And so it felt like forever, but it was a window of time before we found out that in that accident there was 2 fatalities, Elise and her mother-in-law, and that Elise's sister-in-law was injured in the accident, in the wreck. And so, it just was so complicated because of the time zone and living overseas and feeling so helpless because we couldn't get to the hospital to be with our family. We had one daughter, our youngest daughter was still living with us. She was a senior in high school. And our other daughter was and is married and lived close by. So she was rushing there with her husband. So, yeah, there was a lot of complicated factors of just getting this news and just being completely unprepared for it.
Definitely the emotion of shock had to be a reality. What other emotions do you remember in those first few hours as you were learning about what was happening and eventually found out that she had passed away?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the things that I felt is I need to stay within some sense of reasonableness. I could not let the emotion overwhelm me. There was too much to do in that moment. As Heather already said, we're living in South Africa. We're 7 hours ahead. Again, a minor detail, but significant in this time is by that time, all the flights have already taken off to the States. So we are a minimum of 24 hours of even getting on a plane, which then is another 15 or 16-hour flight. So we're a day and a half minimum. And so all of these details, and one of the hardest truly was, where do you start to inform people? Who's first? What does that look like? What do you tell them? Recognizing, particularly in our world of, even back then, social media, things move very, very quickly. And so trying to get ahead of that, trying to be as much as I could without some hero syndrome, but to be something stable. But I remember very distinctly, going, wow. And having to tell Heather and Julia, who were there with me. And I'll just never forget those moments of having to convey that news to people who loved us so deeply, who loved Elise so deeply, and who loved our family. But having this sense of, I have to hold this together as much as possible, because there are some very practical things that needed to be done and couldn't wait.
I think I can remember really trying to quench fear and just praying, claiming scripture, just trying to be as calm as well for Julia, our youngest daughter, so she wouldn't completely freak out. And I think we were almost too calm that she misunderstood that this, I think she didn't recognize how serious it could be. But yes, I can remember Todd taking that call from our son-in-law outside and then coming in, and just when he told us, Julia and me, we just both screamed and we couldn't believe it. You just never quite know what you would be experiencing in that moment, and just feeling so helpless. And I think because I had lost a friend a few years earlier, tragically and suddenly, and we also had an incident on our field where there was an accident and somebody was killed and a number of people gravely injured. And this social media thing, I was panicked in another way than we need to get this word out to the most important people before it gets out on social media. And I think that was a justifiable concern. And so we were very quickly trying to get ourselves together and to make all those calls to everybody that was overseas, all the most important people first. Yeah, and then going from there.
So there were 2 phone calls. You received a first call that there was an accident, and then a subsequent one that she had passed away. How much time was in between those 2 calls, Todd?
If I remember, it was about 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. But during that time, I just had a sense in my spirit, this is serious, that this is not going to be just an incident that comes and goes. And I remember very distinctly going outside and really just surrendering. Lord, I don't know where this is going. I sense that we are just going to have to trust you like we have never trusted you before. And just this utter sense of helplessness, but surrender.
As a parent, I cannot even imagine what those 90 minutes must have felt like, much less the second phone call and where that went from. Walk me through what happened next. What did the next few hours? I know you mentioned, Heather, trying to share this with certain people. What all happened over those next few hours? And I'm assuming by this point it's getting to be late into the evening.
It was. We immediately contacted our church where we lived in Pretoria and our home group in particular, and just so grateful. We had friends from the organization we worked with as well as our church who just immediately were very present. They came over. You almost hardly remember it in retrospect, but two of the ladies who were closer family friends immediately kind of tended to Julia, our youngest, and was just able to be there for her, had her in another room, just allowing her to grieve, cry, whatever her emotions were at the time. And immediately we had practical things we had to think about. We had to send an email to inform financial supporters. We were missionaries, and let them know what had happened so they could begin praying, and then looking at tickets. How do we get back to the States as fast as possible? There's only one flight that leaves a day, so that happened on a Sunday, and we knew we wouldn't be able to leave till Monday night. So all of those things and leaving our jobs and our roles, and thankfully, Julia had just started a school break, as God would have it. But yeah, all of those things, you're leaving your house for undetermined amount of time. You just have to make a lot of decisions very quickly, and your brain is just mush. Mm-hmm. That's just the reality of during shock. And so having some people there to kind of help us think through what we're needing to do was also helpful.
Mm-hmm. Now, did the members of your church, did they know Elise or just know of her?
That's a great question.
Yes.
Interestingly enough, because we were in South Africa for 2 different seasons,
mm-hmm.
7 years, then back in the States for 3, and then another 7, they didn't know Elise or our middle daughter, Rachel, really. They had known of them, but their experience was with our youngest, Julia, who was there.
Sure.
Some of our colleagues did, though.
Okay.
Yeah, and that made the difference.
Okay. So let's fast forward beyond those first few hours. You're on a plane, you come back to the States. Walk us through those next few days. What were your biggest needs that people were able to serve and minister to you with, and how did people comfort you when you got back here to the United States?
So one very distinctive memory that I have, and it plays into a wider answer, but a very, very dear friend of ours was a significant person at Chick-fil-A, and I will never forget, as we're literally driving back to Heather's parents' house from the airport, from Hartsfield Airport, I get a phone call. And she tells me, she said, this is Cheryl, and I just need you to listen. She said, I need you to tell me where you need food, how much you need food, and when you need food. And she said, I'm also going to text you the number of a florist, and she's already been instructed that whatever you all need, just make it happen. And it just lifted this burden of what do we do? It was all those, as Heather said, there's all these things spinning in your head, and how are you going to take care of this, and how are you going to take care of that? And it just plays into one of the other ideas of somebody just leaning in, knowing there's a need, not even having to ask. That was just a burden lifted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think just arriving at the airport and facing our son-in-law and our other children who picked us up, that was overwhelming. A picture I will never forget. And not knowing who to embrace first. And we're just all devastated and confused. But looking back, God did provide amazing people to help us at every juncture. And I don't just say that lightly, but my parents' pastor, he came over and he just spent time with us, and somebody helping us plan for the memorial, and somebody helping us with food, and just all of those things. You have trouble thinking yourself, and gifting us a grave site for her to be buried in, and just the kindness of God to supply all of our needs, even when we didn't even know what we needed. And that was a huge blessing. And then remember, there was 2 funerals being planned.
Yeah.
And so that was also somewhat of a dance, but just so grateful for our son-in-law's family, and we were all believers, and just being able to step in together and make something meaningful of the loss, and to remember our loved ones in a beautiful way. I'm very grateful.
Yeah. Todd, I want to go back to a few of the things you shared about food and flowers. I'm thinking back to the story in, I believe it's Luke chapter 10, about the parable of the Good Samaritan. And if I remember right, how that story ends, he says something to the effect of, whatever needs that this injured person has, put it on my account and I will take care of it. Which is interesting at multiple levels. For one, I think it reminds us that God cares for our bodies as much as he cares for our hearts. Our bodies are, he made us as embodied beings with real felt needs. And I think, who is it, Maslow, that taps into that a little bit about the hierarchy of needs. Kind of help frame this up a little bit for us, Todd, or paint a picture a little bit. There are heartfelt, deep emotional needs, but there are also real physical needs. Talk to the listener who's not walking through the tragedy, but the listener who is learning about a tragedy, or gets a phone call that my friend or my coworker or whatever has just lost someone. How can they help with both physical needs as well as the emotional needs? And why is it important to do both?
Yeah, I think to Heather's point, you're just spinning at that stage. Your brain is on fire. You don't know all these death chores, particularly, again, as Heather mentioned, she had only been married 6 months. So there's things, that bank accounts that are still tied to us. I'll give you a very practical one with powers of attorneys and safety deposit boxes and all these things. And literally somebody calling us, in fact, it was Elise is the owner of the business, saying, if you need an attorney, I'm just going to send you his name and just use him. And so it's anticipating what some of the very practical things are going to be, and then just activating them. When it comes to food as well, you don't know what some people like and don't like. And I'm trying to be a little light here, but not everybody likes stuffed peppers or, broccoli and peas. So what is another alternative to that still meets that need? And it's gift cards, and it's Uber Eats, and nowadays that provides that, where they don't have to think through those practical applications. If a simple thing, again, you don't have to ask them, can I come mow your lawn? Just go mow their lawn. I'm going to come over and I'm going to pick up your car and I'm going to fill it with gas. All these practical things that are somewhat autonomic to us. In that moment, they're not thinking about, I don't have enough gas in my car to get here. I need a ride to go there, whatever that may be. Not everything needs their permission. You want to be careful about their personal space. But the last thing you want to do, and the easiest thing to do, is to hold back. But what people don't realize is when you bring it up, you're actually acknowledging and celebrating. So you're acknowledging the loss and celebrating that person. You'll often hear people say, I didn't want to bring them up because it'll make them sad, or if they weren't thinking about it. Trust me, they're thinking about it and they're sad. But not all tears are sadness. Some are happy tears at remembering the beautiful things that you experienced with that person together.
And another thing on the food, I found very helpful because it's hard to keep track of all the dishes. A practical thing is our home group leader just instinctively knew this. She said, everybody has to deliver in disposable containers. And that was so nice to not have to worry about whose was whose and that things were labeled. So that was a practical thing. And Todd and I both agree that it is helpful to sometimes have somebody just think for you and offer these nice gestures, because sometimes you feel bad and you would say no if you were asked. But then I think also it's okay to say, would this be helpful if I ... Just to also still give some ownership to that person, to not feel like you're taking over. So
well said. We've talked about the first few hours. We've talked about the first few days. My suspicion is there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of phone calls and text, and there's as you've mentioned already, there are things that had to be done. And then on top of all that, there's the noise, I would imagine, of your own head screaming with questions and thoughts and all these different things. What role did silence and simple presence of others play in this process of grieving in those first few days?
I think it was monumental. I can give a very specific answer. This was in the first several weeks, I think, after we returned back to South Africa. I got a call from a dear friend here in the States, and it was this literally almost verbatim. He said, Todd, firstly, I don't have any idea what you're going through. I can't begin to imagine it, so I'm not going to. He said, but secondly, he said, I need you to know that no matter how long and how dark the journey, I will always be right here.
Wow.
And he hung up the phone. And while the songs and the verses and the kind words and gestures were heartfelt, I will never forget that. Because he was the hands in Jesus in that moment. It was like, I will be present. I will listen to you. I will sit with you, even 9,000 miles away. I will just be here. He wasn't trying to fix me. I wasn't an agenda item. He said, I don't know, but I'll sit in the mystery and in the darkness of divine mystery.
So well said. Heather, why don't maybe you could share a little bit as well from your perspective. How did just getting quiet and being silent, how did that help you, or did the Lord use those moments in the following days?
I think as I look back, like especially the first evening, those who came to the home, I would say, whether or not they had done it before, they really were so perfectly present with us, not just allowing us to. They were very sensitive to the emotions in the moment, and so. But I also had a friend. It was a South African friend, not an American friend, who was very present in the early stages, but then ongoing. She had suffered different losses in her life, and so she had that deep empathy. And I can just remember how kindly she would send a message, or if I was in her presence, she would, maybe just a hand on my shoulder, or just I'm thinking about you, and those type of ministry of presence. It was just truly God. I always say, as I look back, I think there are three things I can identify for where we are today, and it is really the grace of God, the prayers of his people, and a trauma-informed Christian counselor who was willing to journey with us through the early stages of our questions. Because as you said, that there's a lot in your head, and I think as believers, the layer of grief can be complicated because we are confused when bad things happen to us, and it's common to ask questions and to wonder things. Did we sin? Did something, what was the reason? We're always looking for a reason, I think. And even Jesus asked why at the end of his life. That was a beautiful thing for me to think about, that he knew ultimately why he was suffering, but he still said, my God, why have you forsaken me? And so to allow the questions and to allow it's a part of the process. Mm-hmm. So the grief journey, and that's what happens after all the initial things have the service, and as Todd referred to, we coined it death chores, these hard things that you have to do, closing bank accounts, closing phone accounts, legal matters, those type of things that just have to be done, cleaning out closets and very difficult things, but they have to be done. But I think that giving yourself that space to go, to sit with God in the reality of the what is and what's next, and allowing yourself to go there is a really important next and part of the process of coming to terms with the new reality. And I think it's in that journey that the Lord allows us, or he brings understanding, and also where things we see redemption in what's hard that we couldn't see before. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
Can I just share a quote? Is
absolutely.
That all right? So one of the quotations that meant a lot to us is from Henry Nouwen in his piece called Out of Solitude. And it says, when we honestly ask ourselves which person in our lives means the most to us, we often find that it is those who, instead of giving such advice, solutions, or cures, have chosen rather to share our pain and touch our wounds with a gentle and tender hand. The friend who can be silent with us in a moment of despair or confusion, who can stay with us in our hour of grief and bereavement, who can tolerate not knowing, not curing, not healing, and face with us the reality of our powerlessness. That is the friend who cares.
Well said. So well said.
And I would just echo that. It was the power. People underestimate the power of just being there, because in our humanity, we want solutions. We want to help. And in that moment, there's really nothing to do but just grieve. You're not looking for a quick answer necessarily. There isn't a quick answer. There isn't a solution as we would normally. This isn't a problem to be solved. And we approach many things as a problem to be solved. This is a circumstance we would have never written into our narrative. But now, to Heather's point, we are asked, what do we do next?
So well said. Well, I want to invite the listeners to join us for the next episode as we dive in a bit deeper into some of the things you just shared about what the friend, what the family member, what others can come alongside and say or do, or not say or not do. And I also want to hear in this next episode how the two of you process this grief journey, not just those first few weeks and months, but really the past 9.5 years, because I think that can both be an encouragement and just give some good stepping stones. So we look forward to coming back in a subsequent episode to hearing more on these two elements. And to each of you listening, thanks for joining us for What's the Truth. We encourage you to subscribe or like the podcast on your favorite podcast app, and be sure to share this with others.